such a difference to explore this city with the lady in front of our beautiful rickshaw.
This is something which a lot of foreign tourists particularly want for roaming around the city, and this will provide a long required service in the tourist city of Jai.
So HSBC has been a very long-term partner with Axis.
Welcome back, everyone. We will now begin our second session in the track Women's Economic Empowerment, titled Enhancing Impact Through Linkages, What is Next for NRLM? I would warmly like to invite the moderator, Mr. Samik Sundar Das, Senior Rural Development Specialist for World Bank. I would also like to invite our esteemed guest, Ms. Usha Rani, Lead IB&CB, Gender, National Mission Management Unit, NRLM, Dr. Bidisha Baroha, Senior Evaluation Specialist 3IE, Mr. S.M. Vijayanand from Kudumshri, and Ms. Madhu Khitan, Program Director from Pradhan. I would now hand over the mic to Mr. Samik Das to take over the session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Shruti. Welcome all to this technical session of Livelihood India Summit, enhancing impact through linkages. What's next for NRLM? I think this is a very, very critical subject given the scale at which NRLM is working in the country today. And we have a very esteemed panel of guests to give us their perspective, knowledge and inputs into what has been the experience of NRLM and other kind of convergence related activities in the space of rural development in India. As I see and read it from the NRLM website, it has a very good definition of what they are going to do on convergence and partnerships. It says the purpose of NRLM getting into convergence and partnership is to enhance effectiveness of development program, which will greatly enhanced with linkage between institution of the poor, that's the NRLM institution, the SHG, VOs and the cluster federations, with PRIs, the Panchayati Raj institutions and the line department. I think the three main stakeholders in delivering services to the poor and to the communities in various parts of rural India. And also the convergence we know as a matter of fact, not only is about resource efficiency, but it's also about inclusion. It's about rights to services and access. It's about creating impact at household level from a multi-pronged kind of a strategy. So NRLM as a platform has been working with various programs, including the Kudumshri program or other PRI-based programs like the NREGS, and it has created some impact on ground. So in this 90 minutes, we are going to listen to some of this experience, some of the results that have come out of impact evaluation, and also understand what are the next challenges and the way forward in this linking PRIs, linking government line departments and community institutions to deliver development outcomes. The way we are going to structure this 90 minutes would be like a first segment of discussions of around 8 to 10 minutes each for of our esteemed panelists. They will do some presentations and also will give their points as discussions. And then we will have some more further remarks from the panelists depending upon issues raised by each of the panelists. And also we'll have a Q&A session at the end around 15-20 minutes. With further ado, let me call upon Usha Rani. Ms. Usha Rani is from the Ministry of Rural Development, National Rural Livelihood Mission, is the lead for institutional building, gender and food, nutrition, health and WASH for the National Mission Management Unit. She has been working in the sector for more than 20 years, and she has in-depth knowledge of convergence, building community institutions, and working with women on the ground. So Usha, over to you for your presentation and your first remarks for next 10 minutes. Can we run the presentation for Usha, Sweta, please?
Yeah, we can begin. Go to next slide, please. Yeah, so if you just click on. If you see, as per the to address the multidimensional issues of the poverty, as per its framework, DAY NRLM is creating awareness among the SHG members and facilitating them to access their rights and entitlements. So actually, NRLM is converging both intra and also with interdepartmental convergence we are focusing on. And especially like we are converging with MGNREGS, Agriculture Department, Horticulture and Animal Husbandry and Skill Development, basically to address the livelihood related issues of the poor people. And also we are actually trying to converge with WCD, Health, Education Departments to address the nutrition, health and educational issues of the SHG members and their children also. And also like we are trying to converge with
Usha, we are losing you. We are not able to hear you properly. Usha, are you there?
Food security related issues and Ministry of Social Justice, to address the issues of most vulnerable. Okay, am I audible now? With various line.
No, sir, we are not able to hear you at all. Is there a solution to this, Sumit?
Is it clear now? Just a minute, please. Yeah, am I audible now? Yeah, okay. See, NRLM is converging with various departments, especially with the MGNREGS, Agriculture, Horticulture, Animal Husbandry, Skill Development, basically to address the livelihood related issues of the poor people. And also like NRLM is converging with the WCD Department, Women and Child Development Department, Health, Education, for addressing the issues of nutrition, health and education issues of SHG members and their children also. And also we are converging with the Civil Supplies Department for addressing the issues of the food security, and with the Social Justice Department basically to address the issues of most poorest of the poor and vulnerable, especially the SC, ST and PVTG and other the people. And as all of you know, next slide please. As all of you know, the panchayats play a very critical role in planning, implementation and of the various poverty alleviation programs of both state government and also the union government programs, and also providing the services. So, and after 14th Finance Commission, in fact, many states have embarked on preparation of the GPDPs. So in 2016, under the able leadership of Mr. Vijayanand sir, next slide please. Under the able leadership of Vijayanand sir, in fact, DAY NRLM has issued an advisory on partnership with the PRIs. So the main objectives of the partnerships are basically 5. So one is like it is empowering the poor to know, to demand and to access their rights and entitlements, and to include the poor and vulnerable sections of the community in local development process and enabling them to benefit from it, and also to strengthen the local democracy and like engendering the local level development and make it participatory and inclusive, and strengthen Gram Panchayat through citizen engagement and also making Gram Panchayat responsive and accountable. So for this, what we have done is, next slide please. What we have done is, we have adapted two approaches for the PRI CBO convergence partnership. The one is the intensive approach and the another one is the extensive approach. With the support of the World Bank project, the National Rural Livelihood Program, in fact, the special projects were given in some of the states, and later on under Day NRLM also we have taken up. So we have issued an advisory in 2016, and the pilot programs were implemented in 139 blocks across 11 districts. So this includes northeastern states also. Across the country we have implemented this. So the major focus of this PRI CBO convergence is basically on creation of local resource groups and internal mentors, so that these people will actually train the PRIs and also the CBO members on various aspects like their rights and entitlements, how PRIs has to function, and how the communities need to participate in the Gram Sabhas and various things. And also with the support of Kutumbashree, we have actually prepared some participatory planning tools, especially for development of the entitlement plans, livelihood plans, infrastructure plans, and no cost, low cost component kind of a plans also. And also in this intensive approach, what we have focused is, we focused on mobilization of the community members to participate in the Gram Sabhas also, and also a very intensive participatory exercise that is called as village poverty reduction planning process. Actually, we have taken up across 139 blocks, and presenting these VPRPs in the Gram Sabhas, so by the village organization, so that the PRIs can consider the requirements of the poorest of the poor people. So this is one kind of an approach we have taken up, and in many of the states, in fact, the states now, after completing the pilot program, they are going for expansion also. So apart from this, actually, we have actually taken up the extensive program. And in the extensive program, what we have done is, I think in 2017 onwards, we have initiated this particular thing, and current year, very intensive inputs were given to all the states. What we have done is, we have developed village poverty reduction planning tools, especially for the preparation of the entitlement plans, livelihood plans, basic infrastructure, services, goods and resource plan, and social development plan. The more focus was given on the social development plan, and we have trained CRPs at the rate of 2 per village organization. In almost like 1.38 lakh GPs, we have taken up this particular process of preparation of the VPRP. So here these CRPs are supposed to conduct the training programs to the SHGs and also the village organizations, and facilitate these CBOs in preparation of these plans, prioritization of these plans, and consolidating it and presenting it in the Gram Sabhas, and also mobilizing the members to participate in the Gram Sabhas, and making sure that integrating these VPRPs into the GPDPs. And this year, in fact, in the plan, as part of the Plan Plus, we requested all the village organizations to, with the support of the PRIs, to upload the VPRPs, whatever the approved VPRPs are there in the website also. So currently, this process is going on across the country. So every year, last 3 years we are doing, and this year it is very intensive. Around 37,830 to 823 villages, we have actually like prepared the plans. We have submitted to the Gram Sabha, submitted in the Gram Sabhas. So next slide, please.
Usha, 2 minutes more, please.
Yes. Yeah. So in this, actually, what we are trying to actually achieve is, we wanted to actually create a kind of an institutional forum and also a negotiation space for the poorest of the poor and poor people to raise their demands, and also a kind of institutional identity for the CBOs, and involving the community in participatory decision making process, and enhanced participation of women in local governance, and especially political participation also, especially in the PRIs we are envisaging. And we are with the, I think MGNREGS and other departments requested a role for the SHGs, especially in the vigilant role they wanted. So we have actually developed social audit CRPs also in that, and the SHG members are participating in various committees also. And PRIs and SHGs can work together on the social developmental agendas. But while doing so, there are some very good positive responses also at the state level, and we are seeing some good change. But there are lots of challenges that we are facing, and we are trying to overcome those challenges. Especially the first and foremost challenges, despite of issuing the advisory also, there is a problem in many of the states in accepting CBOs as legitimate institutions in planning, monitoring, and implementation. And the PRAs are having limited funds, and especially 6 schedule areas, they don't even access these funds also. And especially the line departments are not actually acknowledging the BPRPs, and they are not considering them for providing the support. And in many places, what the observation continuously coming from the field is line departments are not participating in the Gram Sabhas also. And there is a need to orient all the line departments and PRIs on the role of CBOs, especially in this complete the people's planning process, so that they can understand and they give that kind of a value to these CBOs. And whenever these plans are presented, and one more observation that has come strikingly is there is very less importance given for the social development plans. So these are some of the challenges we are facing, and continuously we are conducting a review meeting with the states and also discussions with our the Ministry of Panchayat Raj Department, and together also we are conducting meetings with all the states. So this is very briefly about what we are trying to actually do under convergence. Thank you, Samir.
Thank you, Usha. I think that the presentation really provided the overall NRLM framework on convergence and partnerships, and the focus of the convergence activities towards rights and entitlement and interdepartmental coordination with agri skills, animal husbandry, WCD. What I took away from your presentation is the massive effort that has gone into decentralized planning with the process of BPRPs in use here. Around 37,823 BPRs have been developed in under NRLM, and I think that's a massive achievement. I think also the challenges that you outlined were really important ones to look at. With that, let me move on to our next speaker, Ms. Madhu Khaitan, who is the Program Director in Pradhan. Madhu Khaitan is a development professional who has worked with Pradhan for close to 30 years. His work has been mostly in Jharkhand and Madhya Pradesh, working with focusing on gender equality, women's collectives, livelihoods, enterprises, and various other aspects. Madhu, you feel free to introduce yourself further if I missed out in this short introduction. Madhu, would like to understand from you regarding your work on convergence-related activities in cluster approaches in Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, and other parts of the country, and what experience and what are the key elements of the convergence that's you when you work on ground and when you come up to the macro level and look at convergence as an approach, as a strategy, as a policy. So can you bring those two aspects of your work in your perspective in the next 10 minutes? Thank you, Madhu. Over to you.
Thanks, Amit. And I will try to, bring in my experience of the field, but also, as you said, distilling from that some elements that go into making convergence successful. So first, so I was trying to see, as you also, Samik, you saw in the NRLM website, I was just trying to see, the dictionary definition of convergence. So, the Webster defines it as when two or more distinct things come together. So in that perspective, when we talk about convergence, primary for me is, what is the driver for such a coming together of two or more distinct things? Huh? That is of primary importance. So many times, I think convergence also seems to have become, in many cases, a means of reaching the last mile, using institutions as a conduit. It may also be, reducing the administrative costs, improving the performance of development programs. These are all laudable goals, huh? But I think somewhere amidst all these articulations, the primary objective should always, I think, have the center staging which it requires, which in my mind, and I think, in all our minds is, how does this convergence kind of impact the larger well-being of the community or the institutions, talking in the context of, because we all kind of, also focused on NRLM and SHG based institutions. Also, how does it kind of also lead to a growth of the institution and also the well-being of the clientele of these institutions? So that has to remain the primary goal, rather than, the administrative convenience for us as, development actors. Plus, if we want institutions to own it, for example, we're talking of SHG institution, then there has to be a jointness to it. So there has to be, the SHG-based institutions, they have to actually understand the perspective, and there has to be a joint goal setting. Only then actually, convergence will really happen. And there has to be flexibility for institutions who may be interested to participate in this. So this was about the objective. The second question for me is, who is kind of driving this process of convergence? So there can be various scenarios, and my intention is not to compare these, but for, building an overall picture for all our understanding. So one is that we've seen examples of state-driven convergence, and there are numerous examples that we all are familiar with. One is the, the Poshan Abhiyan, which in which the Department of Health and Family Welfare and RD came together. Then there's a very beautiful example of the Prime Minister Awas Yojana and Narega convergence, wherein in the PMAY program, a component of labor days and sanitation was done through MGNREGA's convergence. So that's one kind of state-driven this thing. The other is kind of civil society facilitated, and there are several examples again, taking Pradhan's examples. I can talk about the Narega example, particularly is kind of standing out, and, wherein we've kind of facilitated SHG collectives to leverage investments available under MGNREGs to actually create livelihood assets, individual livelihood assets for members and their households. So large scale, mango orchards, irrigation assets, and land development assets, etc., have been created, and this has actually led to an institutional agenda of, more credit absorption, more credit offtake has also been happening due to these investments, because so it has actually led to not just an impact on the Narega investments, but also led to an impact on NRLM investments and better use of the NRLM credit being available through the SHGs. Then, there are also examples of, which may be more the Swayambhu bottom-up community-led convergence processes, for example, the kind that Usha just described through the VPRP process, which is, the state has kind of emulated it, but, there can be bottom-up processes of the kind that Usha described, wherein the SHG collectives at the bottom level and the Gram Panchayats kind of come together to create more collaborative mechanisms between them, and therefore leading to, better delivery of various kinds of development programs. So these are, and I think in my limited understanding, I think the state's role lies in creating such enabling frameworks, but thereafter the process should be more bottom up, wherein the local actors build on their agencies to actually leverage these convergence ideas, and that really leads to a grassroots movement really getting created to actually make use of these opportunities to further their own goals and to actually contextualize in their own areas. I don't know how much time I have, just like to share a few more points. One is that, we also have to see the correct life cycle stage of the CLF or the institutions at which, convergence may be appropriate or suitable for them. So, for example, right at the very beginning of the institutional formation, it might take away from the major focus. So we also have to be cognizant of the stage of the institution. We also need to be cognizant of, if the process has to be led by the SHG collective, then we also have to focus on building capacities of the institution to actually make that convergence happen in their own context. So they have to build a perspective. They have to locate the problem in their context. And rather than, we have to build their capacities of both leading, governing, as well as managing, rather than only using their capacities of extension processes, which many times I think that seems to become the case. And also for this to happen, I think we need to also broad base cadre-led extension processes to actually institution-led processes. For that, and that's a more, I would say, a complex process. So it requires that kind of investment at the level of the institution. Also, it also, as we said, convergence means two distinct separate things to come together. Now, it's also not just a technical process. There are people in all these two domains, and people have their own sense of boundary, their own sense of domain. So if I have to let go of my sense of my domain to actually collaborate with another entity, then it requires human processes. So, for example, all the challenges that Usha also mentioned, is because of these human processes. Panchayats have to actually visualize a merit in collaborating with SHG collectives. SHG collectives also have to move beyond looking at Gram Panchayats as, entities that are only cornering benefits. So there is mutual, if I can say, suspicion on both sides, which requires, actually facilitation. It cannot just happen only by, capacity building processes. It requires actually, that kind of granular work with both these institutions to actually make it furthering collaboration rather than, competition. I know I'm running out of time, but just like to, there are 1 or 2 points. We also have to recognize for convergence to happen in an institution-led manner, we have to recognize the costs of the women-led institutions. Otherwise, we're kind of only creating, we kind of banking upon women's unpaid labor, which anyway we all of us recognize within the homes. Anyway, it is happening. We cannot, again make these institutions again run upon women's unpaid labor. So we have to recognize, for example, if NREGA has to be also the implementation, we are foreseeing role of NRLM, CLF kind of institutions, then we also have to make provisions for actually, meeting the cost of implementation. In the past, we've seen toilet construction happening through CLFs, but without, actually making any provision for the kind of administrative this thing. I would just like to end by the last point that I want to flag for your, attention is that public community convergence is one thing, but we also need to focus on community private convergence, which needs, some kind of enabling. And by community private convergence, I mean, it could be business consumer kind of this thing, or it could be producer market kind of convergence. This requires, some enabling framework at the level of, policy, and some incentives to also overcome the initial diseconomies of scale. And we have numerous examples already in the NRLM ecosystem. For example, we have the example of Indian Oil partnering with SHG collectives in MP to provide cylinder refills in the Ujjwala Yojana. Or we have example of the school uniform being produced by SHG collectives through umbrella agreement between the respective departments. So I think we need to understand also this phenomena in much more granularity as to what really makes for win-win collaborations or win-win convergence. We're trying to do that from Pradhan along with TRIF through this entity, which is a new entity called the Center for Development of Community Collectives, is working very closely with NRLM and 5 SRLMs to create more such examples of public-private community partnerships around these diverse areas. Thank you, Samir.
Thank you, Madhu. That was like a bouquet of thoughts, ideas, perspective. And the key message I really took away, which I also believe in, is convergence is not an administrative convenience, but it's about well-being of the community and the institutional growth leading to clienteles, overall well-being and overall growth in terms of their own development. And there's an array of things that you spoke about, and I really like the last part of looking at convergence from the perspective of not just community and public, but community and private, and various other aspects which you have laid out. I'll come back to them in the next segment. With that, I will go to Vidisa now. Vidisa is from 3i. She's a senior evaluation specialist. She manages a number of programs in 3i, including the multi-state evaluation of National Rural Livelihoods Project that we will be discussing now. Vidisa, over to you. What I would like to understand from you, Vidisa, that you have been a part of various large-scale evaluation of NRLM program. You recently did the evaluation of the NRLM and the convergence with government welfare program like NREGA. So would you like to give us a little bit of understanding of what was the outcome of this evaluation? What are the key takeaways for our audience, and what are the things that you think are working, what are not working as per the evaluation outcome? Over to you, Vidisa.
Thank you so much, Sami. I have a presentation just, which to give some structure to my thoughts. And before I start off, I wanted to really thank Usha ji and Madhu for a really excellent, start to the conversation. And I hope that, this, what I am going to present will really just be able to put some numbers to what has already been discussed. So we can go into the next slide now. Let me start by, giving a brief snapshot of some of the main findings of the NRLP evaluation that 3IE with our partners in Brutti and Stanford conducted. And our main objective was to understand what has been the impact of NRLP close to a decade after it was started. Actually not a decade, but perhaps 8 years after it started. And the time was exactly right. We did this evaluation around, the report came out in 2020, but the data is collected for the year 2018-19. And, the time was about right because, that was when these discussions on what next for NRLM really were picking up. One of those recommendations that we had based on our findings was, among other things, we really emphasized the need to do more than just financial inclusion, focusing mostly on livelihoods generation and convergence. And here, just to give you, again, numbers to what I'm trying to say, our evaluation found that there were significant improvements in household income, in male hours of work. And we also found that female, although still women, although they were still very much, working in unpaid domestic chores, there was an increment in the number of women who were involved in productive activities outside what they regularly do in their households, and there was an increased diversification. So some strong impacts on the economic front, and this we saw was primarily due to the great job that NRLP was doing in promoting financial inclusion and access. There was an increment in loans. SAGs are providing the much needed credit, there was a reduction in informal loans. What we did not see, however, was, along with this increase in incomes, we didn't quite see, a significant and a striking increment in women's empowerment. We saw no impact in women's household decision making, and among all the women, it was really the highly educated women, relatively highly educated women, who gained in confidence because they were engaging with the community more often. So this made us, and this really led us to suggest that more needs to be done besides financial inclusion, and also apart from just focusing on the monetary side, which is of course important, but needs something more. Hence, we talked about giving to women, skills that are tangible and linkages that they can work and that are sustainable. And this actually led us to think more carefully about convergence. What we found out of in our data, and our data is actually quite extensive. We covered, what I'm reporting here is from is data from 7 states out of the 9 that were involved in this evaluation. Really thanks to the SRLM for their patience with us, and over 4,000 SAGs that we covered. We saw that 40% of SAGs were reported that they were involved in SAG convergence activities. And this was driven by the older SAGs. Needless to say that it was the older SAGs, that were formed before 2015, that were taking up more of these convergence activities. We also found a strong case for federation, as Madhu and Ushaji had pointed out, the importance of federations. When SAGs are federated, they're significantly more likely to take up convergence activities. Can we go on to the next slide? Yeah. So essentially, what we this led us to really understand the value and potential of convergence. We looked at various programs within our impact evaluation. We looked at NREGS. We looked at Swachh Bharat and the Ujjwala schemes, things that were facilitated by schemes that were facilitated by the SHGs. And of course, there are, there's a difference in focus about which program you want to emphasize, but NREGA was definitely one of those programs that were priority. So this led us to work on a secondary paper based on the data that we have already collected of 2018 and 19. We wanted to understand, what is the impact, and when we were in the field, so the one thing that came across to us in our conversation was, what about convergence? What about convergence? So to understand the impact of various convergence activities across streams, across programs, we reached out to the states to understand exactly when was convergence activities started. We got the data from 5 of our 7 states that were involved in our evaluation, and we merged this block level data. We know when a block started convergence, and in particular NREGA convergence for this particular analysis. We know when a block started the NREGA convergence, and we have a whole bunch of outcomes and impact estimators that we have from our household surveys. And what we did is precisely, and I don't have to now go back because Ushaji has already put in such a nice timeline, but make use of the timeline that I have presented above. So really, if you notice that, NREGA started sometimes in 2005, and it was also done in a very phased manner. NRLM2 started, in earnest, I would say, there's a long history of SHGs, but in terms of NRLM and in the 7 states that we were looking, really started in earnest in 2011 or 12, and then it continued. And somewhere between 2015 and 16, that was when, a circular was sent out, which clearly laid out that how NRLM will be linked to NREGA and what were the expectations out of such a convergence. The focus of this convergence, and from our reading of these various circulars, was that, there had to be some, of course, the relationship was expected to be symbiotic. There was women from SHGs were to be involved in the planning and monitoring of NREGA. What assets to be created under NREGA. They would be involved in the planning of NREGA, in the budgetary process, and in the monitoring side of it. Now this led, and of course, the fact that, they would be working to make sure that people who did not have job cards, who were the left out poor, were brought under the folds of NREGA. So there were clear outcomes for NREGA. It was important to make sure that the delivery was right, that it reached the excluded poor. And for NRLM, the converse, what was to be gained from NREGA was precisely what Madhu had mentioned, that, to bring women into by the process of being involved in planning, are women empowered? Are they joining the community as equal participants as men? So there were NREGA outcomes and there were NRLM outcomes. What we did was to use the phased implementation of the program of convergence across blocks. Do note that this is across blocks. And there were some blocks that had not started the convergence program, others had. And then even within those blocks, we have a set of villages where the SHG program was started before convergence, and there were others within a block where villages SHG mobilization started after convergence was initiated at the block level. And we use this kind of difference. It also answers to a large extent the question that Madhu raised, that what is a good time for to bring in convergence, where SHGs can take convergence activities. We are reversing the question. We are asking that question, but we're asking that question for SHGs as opposed to VOs. That's an analysis that just struck me that I should do as we spoke. Next slide, please. So here's what we found, that villages that were exposed, villages that started nurturing SAGs after convergence was started at the block level, was initiated at the block level. And villages, actually these are Gram Panchayats, where SAGs were mobilized around the same time as there was also the, the program for convergence was taking place. They really did very well when it comes to NREGA outcomes. Yeah. So we saw that in these villages, there were a lot of, higher number of households were working in NREGA. They had, they also earned income from NREGA. There was a reduction in, delay in the reduction in the number of days that they were not paid for. Given that NREGA is, I think this has been written many times about delays and non-payment of wages. Payments were more regular in these villages, and we see really interesting impacts for women's outcomes. Women definitely worked more in NREGA work sites. They earned wage incomes. Women earned more wage income from NREGA because they were working more, as well as getting paid more often, or rather paid for the work that they were doing. So these were some really nice impacts that we saw for NREGA. So NREGA clearly was in some way benefiting from the process of bringing in women into its planning. But what was happening on NRLM outcomes? Now here again, we saw that, the effects for outcomes that mattered for NRLM really did not change much. We looked at certain indicators of women's community engagement, such as whether presence in the whether they were, whether they spoke in Gram Sabhas, whether they, their confidence indices, and their decision making within household. So we don't see much, change there. We do see some impact on women's confidence, but again, it's not something I would really make a big deal of. I have to explore it further. It's weakly significant. So it seems that this process of convergence of NRLM and NREGA really worked for on the building efficiencies in the NREGS system. Overall, however, there was a great reduction. There was a clear impact on well-being. So I haven't put it here, but there was actually those villages where SEGs were coming together at the same time as convergence was happening, and SEGs were forming, and convergence was being laid on top. Where reduced poverty on an index of multidimensional poverty, and reported higher expenditures. And to understand the mechanism further, we are looking into what is going on in the VO processes. We are working to understand, does it make a difference if the village had a VO or didn't have a VO for this impact to be visible or not visible. But at this moment, what we observe is that the general disadvantage of having less exposure to less years of exposure to NRLM really reduces once convergence is convergence with NREGA is layered into this thing. Whether it's working to reach NRLM outcomes is something that we need to still discuss and debate further. But certainly it seems to be working for NREGA.
Thank you, Vidya. I think you brought in the overall the discourse on convergence to a framework of evaluation, where we could look at various impacts of convergence on SSG as institutions. As you rightly said, maybe you have to do deep dive into the VU as institution and convergence outcomes. But I think it was interesting to look at your perspective and understand what is coming out of this evaluation you have done in the last couple of years. And I like the point you made about the cutoff point of 2015 when convergence was coming in, and the rollout of convergence and how it impacted various households who are through SHG got into NREGA kind of activity, and the overall impact on efficiency being brought into NREGA rollout in these blocks. Thank you, Vidisa, on the presentation. I have a few questions. I'll come back in the next segment. But I would like to go back to our, if I would say our premier speaker in this session, Mr. S.M. Vijayanand. He is the ex-Chief Secretary of Kerala and also the Secretary, Ministry of Panchayati Raj, Government of India. He's been a pioneer in actually propagating and also actually bringing decentralization agenda into the community development aspects. He's also been instrumental in bringing the PRI guidelines into NRLM. So without much delay, I would like to understand from Mr. Vijayanand about his overall perspective on current PRI movement in India, if I call it a movement, along with the NRLM, SHG, pro-poor based institution movement, and how does he see in the next 10 years this develops, and how that convergence which has started happening on ground and we are seeing some impact can be further deliver on various outcomes that NRLM and PRI as institutions have been focusing on. Over to Mr. Vijayanand. Thank you.
Thank you, Samik. I'll touch most of the points have been covered, so there's not much which remain to be covered. But one thing, when it for the poor, and when we talk of multidimensional poverty or the capitals which the NRLM mentions, 5 capitals, then this is very, very important. Without convergence, poverty cannot be. It's as simplistic as that. But then I tried adding 2 more capitals, but it has not found official acceptance so far. What I call civic capital and political capital. Civic capital means you are a citizen, not just getting some money, school education and this thing, but it's as important as social capital. The next step of social capital. So civic capital means only when you have this relationship with the panchayats, you're participating in Gram Sabha, not in a client relationship, but as a right. Political capital is not becoming the panchayat member. Political capital is the next step of civic capital, where you have a formal role in resource allocation at the local level, mainly through Gram Sabha. So for these 2 things, unless you have the larger agenda, you're asking what should be the next few years, unless you have this concept, then convergence becomes very weak, is more material rather than substantial, power related. Then for any convergence, there is a casual convergence. Everything is happening in a village. They go to a school. So you can't say RT has been accessed by the poor. So purposive, conscious, planned and structured convergence is important. But by structure, I don't mean a very rigid kind of thing, but it is intended by the policymakers in the guidelines, in the orders, and sometimes in the law. Then what is your visioning of the convergence? Of course, when we started convergence in Kerala, it was a very conscious decision about almost 25 years ago, where, for example, in Kerala, the SHG movement predated People's Plan, decentralization. So we were at a loss. What do you do? And there was actually a very high-level committee, 3 of us, trying to think through what should be convergent. So it's a thought-through thing that we said SHGs will not be under, we call them energies here, under the local governments, and local governments shall not control them, but they shall not be parallel to local governments. So government will not try to create separate power structures and communicate separately. So you will work together. We said we'll work together, right to know each other, but you can't interfere in each other's affairs. This was put in writing, and that was a very, very important thing. At the time, I didn't use the word, or we didn't use the word, but now I find Ambedkar's concept of social democracy and political democracy. Without social democracy, you can't have political democracy. And we can't create the social democracy which Ambedkar envisaged, but this is at least a kind of some step in that social democracy. So bringing together this is bringing together this thing. In Kerala, we said SHGs would be the next step in decentralization. Some of them even use the word communitization of decentralization. So unless you bring this into the concept of Panchayati Raj, understanding of policymakers and local leaders, the convergence may not be real. And so the SHGs go beyond thrift and credit. So that's what I meant, the capital. The real institutional convergence and scheme convergence are different. So institutional convergence we should get for, scheme convergence is incidental. For example, SHG GP should be the real convergence. And what is the logic? And Madhu was mentioning an excellent point. Why should you converge? Just because a bureaucrat writes or a guideline has come from Delhi, you don't converge. Which means there has to be a logic which is accepted by both, sometimes pushed by somebody above because it doesn't automatically get accepted, and also mutual benefit. Unless there is mutual benefit, there's a perception, then it will be Namke Vaste kind of convergence. So mutual benefit here is the logic of SHG. You are an outreach mechanism of panchayats. You can bring people to Gram Sabha. You can be a service delivery agency for panchayat. And in many parts of India, where panchayats have very poor human resources, the SHGs can even write accounts. Educated SHG women can do internal services in an office. So the panchayat benefits. Reverse, for the women, access to resources, empowerment, and then Gram Sabha, all those things. I can go on and on. There's a long list of what panchayat will gain and what the SHGs will gain. Then what are the principles of this convergence? Equal, I mentioned, but something which we missed. I tried to persuade when I was in Delhi looking after NRLM from 2012 to 15, that you try to make your village organization of CLF co-terminus, not exactly, or maybe one VO for two panchayats, but don't cut them, don't make panchayats irrelevant. There is a tendency in Delhi to see panchayats, CSOs, CBOs, all written in one sentence. The recognition of panchayats as local governments is not there, barring very few people. So this lack of understanding ensured that your CLF and VOs all scattered. They really will not converge. So that is very, coterminousness is very important. Then volunteers, because by volunteers is not voluntary in that sense. I am using a Kudumbashree term. There are barefoot specialists in an SHG or a village, one looking after health, this thing. So there should be somebody looking after convergence, somebody looking after Narega and those kind of things. Otherwise, it doesn't happen. Then, of course, it should be a sutra. This convergence should be a sutra of local government. There are Pancha Sutra, Dasha Sutra and all that, but convergence should be a sutra, and somebody should really think through, without which convergence will not be there. And another important area of convergence, which some states are doing, but they have not realized it, is the Mahila Sabha route to Gram Sabha. That's a stepping stone, and with almost 1 crore SHGs, the SHGs can dominate any Gram Sabha in India, in most of India. And they can articulate, they can act together, and they can't be overawed by any of the feudal things. Then, of course, village committees and all that I don't have to say. Then Narega, I remember in 2013, we held a big workshop, because initially NRLM was not very keen on converging with Narega. There was some resistance, saying that no, ours is livelihood and all that, we should not get into other things, we will distract. Organization is more important than all that. So we had a big workshop, and I still remember having used the word, this is the mother of all convergence. Narega SHG is a mother of all convergence. So what we need to push is to the totality. The organization of the work, not just demand of work. The organization of the work should be by the SHG. Just before the GP approves, the SHG Federation should approve the Narega budget. They decide what works, or they substantially decide, not totally decide, when they need work, what kind of work they need, and then that was not conscious way of empowering SHG in Kerala. That is a I must confess, is a kind of serendipity. We brought in SHGs for two purposes. One, there was corruption in all these public works. And we were very particular to get rid of corruption in these kind of works. So we thought SHGs means zero corruption. I can say in Kerala there is zero corruption. Maybe the quality of work is not as it should be because there's no contract. Second is, of course, this should go to the most needy people, so targeting would improve. So with these objectives, if NREGA is taken over by the SHGs, there's nothing in the law preventing it. The panchayat has to approve, but the sub-panchayat process should be entrusted to this thing and organization of the work, including mate. And at one point of time, we even tried to push the idea of a barefoot technician, a barefoot engineer, trained. And ILO had made an excellent training module for training these people for taking the basic measurements and all that, because there was a shortage of engineers. So that is the other kind of thing. Then the law, now that GPDP had just started when I was Secretary of Panchayat Raj, GPDP pushes us to a higher level, particularly since GPDP is supposed to have NREGA and all other resources. So GPDP, you are getting into planning, which I said is a political cabinet, deciding allocation of resources, pulls and pressures, counter pressures, corrupt intentions, all things are there. But if women unite and see their interest, so they are not accessing a scheme, they are accessing resources. They are ensuring the resource use. So that is very, very important. And for all this, I mentioned certain things. It should be part of Sutra. There should be roles clearly given. It will not happen automatically just because of democratic pressure. It doesn't happen. There has to move. And then, as was mentioned by Usha, this has ultimately moved to this. She called it Village Poverty Reduction Program. It's much more convergent. Ultimately, when you have a village poverty reduction program, which is accepted and resources automatically committed. Otherwise, it's only a wish list. Beyond that is very important. Then joint capacity building is very, very clear. And this should be at all levels. We go and ask a Panchayat Raj secretary, what do you want to converge with SHG? It should not be his mind. It should be a policy. Yes, these advantages, these risks are very much there. So it has to be, as was beautifully put by Madhu, it is top down and bottom up. It's both. It's process oriented and instruction oriented. But in India, instructions alone can set off processes. If natural processes come pushed by organizations like Pradhan, well and good. But in most parts of India, it doesn't happen. Some writ has to come from GOI, MOPR, MORD, and this. Then what makes it happen? One, mutual benefit. Second, that is something which is lacking. But I think after time, people will do it. When Kudumbashree started, most departments were not willing it. They saw it's some creation of the local self-government department. But now Kudumbashree has become a social institution. So every department seeks Kudumbashree's help on its own. They don't have to take permission of anybody. So when SHG reaches that stage, so you're asking me what 10 years, where this is seen as a collective of the poor. For anything to do with the poor, that as a target group, all departments approach them just as all departments approach a panchayat. So that is the ultimate thing, where your recognition as a legitimate stakeholder and as a delivery agent, not just a medium. Suddenly you don't have anything, like COVID, there's a problem, ask SHGs to go. No, it's not a temporary kind of thing. You recognize it. Then, of course, involvement in processes. In Pakka, you do this, you prepare a plan, this should be discussed, action taken, all those kind of processes, which of course can be kind of pushed by CSOs. And lastly, when it comes to acts, it will not be, rights are not given, they are taken mostly. So not to fight with the state, but it's a demand. So where the SHG converts into a CSO, demand RTE, demand NFSA, demand your social security. So demand access, of course, purely constitutional within this. So these are the kind of things. So my request to all the persons, of course, I'm part of Pradhan, so I don't have to request myself, but others, particularly from the impact evaluation group, let's try to develop beacons, because these don't happen because of processes and discussions. We really have to structure. And in Kerala, Kudumbashree started in Alappuzha, in an urban area, in Malappuram, and we had a huge learning. Even People's Plan started in one Gram Panchayat for 3-4 years. Then we could easily adapt it. NRLM expanded all over India following this model of beacon or resource blocks. Thank you very much. Now I'll answer any questions later on.
Thank you, Mr. Vijayan. That was, as always, a discourse to listen to and understand how this has to be done in terms of from one village to take it to all India kind of a scale up. How do you scale up that kind of approach and various other area elements that you brought into the discussion today. But now I have some pointed questions, one for Madhu and one for each of the panelists, I would say. To start with Madhu, I think you made a very interesting statement when you said that this whole process of convergence should not be cadre driven, but should be led by institutions. And also you brought in this element of the cost of participation or cost of what we call SSG's involvement in various service delivery or various kind of work they take up on behalf of community in the name of community, but actually may be public in nature. So can you allude a little bit more on that and give some thought to the participants on how do you take that forward?
So yeah, I mean, thanks, Amik. So first, this question of cadre-led and institution-led. I mean, there is a difference. I mean, so when we say that an institution is leading, then there are a whole lot of things that have to go into that process of actually, I mean, starting from it actually, the institution recognizing it as one of their vision, and it falls as it is a part of their mission to actually, so that kind of a recognition and visualization on the part of the leadership of the institution. That's the first starting point. And then, of course, the whole thing of, building both the management capacities as well as the governance capacities of actually making it happen, which is, a little bit very different from, actually rolling out a training program with the help of, designated cadres. So you can actually, the training program will happen and, women will get training days will get generated, but actually, I mean, women will not perceive it as, having contributed or having run with that agenda. So, I mean, so we have to give it that time and, it requires that due process to actually happen. So that's what I meant to say, and of course I can take any example, but I guess the time is limited. So the other thing is that, the costs associated. So, I mean, we have to recognize that any institution embarking on any agenda, there is a cost associated with it. So, for example, in the example of the Swachh Bharat mission toilet construction, which was, in many states, the administration kind of, through a convergence initiative actually, made available these investments through the SSG collectives. But, what about the costs of supervision, etc., of actually, making sure that, the pits are dug properly, the toilet quality is good, the roof is, done properly, etc. Because at the end of the day, you're going to make the collectives responsible for all the, whatever work has been done. So, and also, it just, I mean, also signifies a spirit of partnership. You're actually recognizing the institution as a formal partner in that process, and you're actually legitimizing their role by, a sharing of costs. So one is actually, you're not just building on, women kind of going around their unpaid labor now, beyond the meetings, there's one more agenda around which women have to run around. So that's one thing, but, also, you're actually legitimizing the role that these institutions and saying that actually, if SSG collectives take it up, there is actually a contribution to this whole process. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thanks, Madhu. That further elaborates on your points. Let me go to Usha now. Usha, there is a question on the task on the chat box. What facilitation NRLM is providing in tapping post-COVID-19 opportunities to revamp and strengthen SSG movement? Can you take that question, please, Usha?
So the revamping the SSG thing, that is the question?
Yeah.
Could you please come again?
What facilitation NRLM is providing in tapping post-COVID opportunities to revamp and strengthen SSG movement? It's basically, the question is about COVID has provided certain opportunities. Is there something NRLM is doing to revamp and strengthen the SSG movement to address the opportunities coming out of COVID?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, the post-COVID scenario, even during the COVID and also the post-COVID scenario, the one opportunity what the SSGs have actually like captured is like the BC agent. So the currently like in many of the places the SSG members are acting as the BC agent, and during the COVID situation, in fact they have actually done transactions in almost all the villages. So that is one thing, the financial inclusion front we are able to actually see. And the second thing is on the both on the farm and the non-farm livelihood related activities also, if we see, for example, like the collection of the vegetables and also like distributing it to the collection of vegetables and fruits and distributing it to the COVID patients, and also like making it available to the containment areas also the SSGs have taken. So after having these kind of experiences, now they are actually going for a scale-up related activities also that is happening. Similarly, on the mask production, sanitization, hand sanitizers preparation and all those things also they are doing. And even on the community kitchens thing also, like they have taken up a lot of activities, especially with the migrants. So for doing this thing, what we have actually done is to address the issues, the post-COVID, especially like we are focusing on some of the states where the reverse migration happened on a very large scale. So we have asked the states to prepare separate proposals, especially to address the overall development of the migrants. So these proposals, what they are including the states, what we have asked them to do is, one thing is making sure that all these migrants to be part of the SSG movement, and also they can access the community investment fund, what the mission is actually providing, and also like on the livelihood front, and also the human development related activities also we are asking them to incorporate. So in fact, so far we have approved almost 3 special projects to the states to work with the migrant people. In addition to that, one more thing what we have actually done is like because at the ground level there is a need to really work further on the nutrition related aspect and also on building the immunity. So on a larger scale, we have prepared the modules also on the immunity building with the support of our partner organizations. Now we are planning to actually give training on the how to immunity boosting kind of a training program. And also we are giving special projects on, especially on the health and nutrition related aspects coupled with the livelihoods. So these kind of projects also, separate projects we are giving to the states. So this is how actually we are trying to strengthen the SSGs to utilize the opportunities of the post-COVID, both on the livelihood fronts and also like whatever the issues that has coming up, we are trying to address. And the another part of it, what we are trying to do is through our micro enterprise thing. So now we are developing new loan products also, so that we can meet the credit requirement of the people, and also we are making sure the liquidity at the SSG levels by relaxing some of our policies.
Thank you, Utsa, for elaborating on what NRLM is doing on the opportunities coming out of COVID. Now I'll go to Vidisha. Vidisha, I have a very quick focused question for you. What kind of other evaluations that you are doing to understand the empowerment elements of SSG program And I understood from your presentation that you looked at empowerment only from the perspective of convergence, or it was broader than perspective of convergence. And why? What are the feelings, or what are the data saying regarding overall empowerment of women in the SHG program?
We actually have developed an entire research program around NRLM. So what we have presented to you is really just 2 pieces of work. Tomorrow, in the morning session, Anjani Kochar, who was the lead PI on our NRLM evaluation, will present more work on empowerment, on our research around empowerment. Broadly, what we are observing from our data are that a couple of things matter if empowerment, when it comes to women's empowerment and policies regarding that. The first, of course, that as I have, as my presentation was showed, that when it comes to intra-household gender norms, and particularly bargaining power between a husband and a wife, or a married couple, or a couple living together, those gender norms are really harder to change than one would expect. So while we are observing that women have, from our impact evaluation, while we observe that exposure to federations, being part of federations or even being associated with a federation, meant that women were gaining more mobility. They were gaining more confidence in engaging with persons outside their homes. When it came to bargaining with their own husbands, there were still some strict norms which perhaps don't change with financial inclusion that easily. So that's one of the positions that we have, one of the main findings that we had, and which actually got us very curious on these empowerment indicators. And we really want, in this research program, we want to view women's empowerment in a multiple dimension way. So first, of course, is the woman's personal empowerment, which is related to her own self, to take decisions about herself. Then within her household, taking decisions with her husband, with her family members regarding the household. The third on the community, and the fourth at a larger level. And each of these needs a different type of intervention and a different approach, right? So financial inclusion it pushes women, and the SHG movement, by making this cadre of women, by depending on women to push the program forward, maybe bringing them outside their home, giving them more confidence than they had before to deal with market agents. But when it comes to their homes, those gender norms remain still fixed. And this is also reflected in, the fact that women are still putting most of their time in domestic unpaid work. So that's something that's really, really interesting there. What we see on the other aspect, which is around convergence, the same story is actually played out even with our convergence story, where we see that, women do contribute a lot when it, bringing these SHGs into NRAGS planning made a whole lot of difference to NREGA's efficiencies and implementation. But when it came to the woman's own agency, those did not change as much as we would have expected. Again, it changed for very, very weakly, significantly on her confidence. But particularly when it comes to empowerment as measured by, say, her own assets that she can call her own, decisions about her family, those are dimensions that have not changed with such policy interventions.
Thank you, Vidisha, for elaborating on that, because I think it will be interesting to see as you finalize some of these findings and they are in the public for to look at. Just lastly, I'll go to Mr. Vijay Anand for a couple of minutes without what was the political economy which made Kudamshri happen the way Kudamshri happened? then why didn't the Kudamshri happen in any other state in India? Maybe if I ask that question, what would you enlighten us with?
See, one, of course, I would call it coincidence. Kudumbashree, as I struck roots in the early 90s in the Malappuram district and rural areas, and Alappuzha, it's called Alappuzha now, urban area. So it came from two simple programs, community-based nutrition program and urban basic services, very, very small programs. But people learned, and so there was what we now called evidence-based thing when People's Plan started. So People's Plan was a political priority, top political priority. And I can give an incident, it's not confidential. At that time, the 5 mayors in all the city corporations, Kudumbashree was there, not in other rural areas. So the 5 mayors at that point of time came and met the minister, and all of them from CPM, and told the minister, it's called CDS, the collective of the SHGs. The CDS are parallel, they should be brought under the corporation. We are giving them money and we will look after them or supervise them. So that put us in a dilemma, and we really discussed. So there was a committee with Dr. Isaac, who is now the present finance minister, me as convener, and Prakash Bakshi, who later became CMD of NABARD. 3 of us sat together and said, no, we should protect the autonomy of each. One should not control the other, but they will work together. Then we also conceptualized that point of time, not fully, that it will be a beneficial relationship. And then we also brought the theoretical, or you can call it an ideological element of communitizing development and engendering. So they're all very fussy concepts when we envisage kind of thing. And then the political economy will not work just based on some good wishes, but it worked because there was a fruitful relationship. Both of them learned to work together and gain together. For example, this COVID thing would not have been successful without SMEs. The flood management, where it was mostly voluntary activity, and COVID at least was little more semi-structured with government giving instructions. The 2018 flood management, where women just went out and cleaned everybody's house, rich and poor, as a social responsibility. And that was something unprecedented. Then the Panchayats also realized, yes, they are a kind of thing. The point which you made, the cost to SMEs, there we have been very, very careful to say that you will not be a free service, a voluntary group. Sometimes for voluntary culture and all that you do volunteer, but you are a mature delivery agency, and you are treated as competent professionals, and you are paid according to your professional kind of thing. So it's not like cheap labor substituting the contractor or some other service delivery agent. That was also the concept.
Okay, with that note that you are a competent service delivery agency and convergence is about mutuality, I think with that we will end this session. I think we are coming to the timeline of 5:30. So thank you very much all panelists. It was really pleasure on my side to really ask this question and able to listen to you all and your perspectives, and let's see where we take forward the convergence agenda in the coming years to come. Thank you very much. And good evening.
We also enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Samik. Thanks, Access.
Thank you so much, everyone, for the very exciting discussion on what comes next for NRLM. And a special thanks to the moderator, Mr. Samik Sundar Das, for the adept moderation. Thank you. With this, we come to the end of the day. And we request you all to join us tomorrow at 10 a.m. for a very interesting discussion on empowering women in rural India. What have we learned? Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Disha. Bye.